Great, whenever you're ready.
Okay. My name is Ed McCullough. I was born in 1934 in Danville, Illinois. My folks lived in a little town nearby there. It was during the Depression. My father found work there, but basically we're a family that the larger, more extended family, we're all out of the Chicago area. So when the war broke out, we returned to Chicago. My dad worked at a war plant and went to high school at Fenger High School in Roseland, and had a very unceremonious adolescence. Was really didn't know what I wanted to do, and one thing looked as good as the other, and I really didn't know. And so I tried college after I got out of Fenger, and constantly failed just about everything. I was just bored. I don't know what beyond that. I don't know why. And I thought, well, there's got to be a better answer than this to some of the things I'm interested in. And I knew I wanted to go to college. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to go in the U.S. Navy, get my GI Bill, and it was the best decision I ever made in my life. I had 4 years of sea duty, went into submarines, loved every day of it. The last week of my 4-year enlistment, I really gave serious consideration to staying in. Shipmates, it was a bonding that was beyond family. I'd never experienced anything like it before. And so I wanted to go to college, and I did. Came to Illinois State University. Some friends from high school had gone there and said good things about it. And was in social science, of all things, the first semester. And I thought, I don't know about this. And by dint of luck and just who knows what, I took a course a required course in art appreciation with Professor Bill Lidd. And boy, I liked what I was being exposed to, and I talked to Bill about it, Professor Lidd, and he said, you know, you got a good eye. One damn thing led to another. I just followed. Instinct was in front, brain, everything else behind, and I said, I'm going to go into art. Declared an art major, and I never looked back.
Something to consider.
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
Let's back up a little bit to when I was still in high school, junior high and high school. My brother, a photographer of note, was in the war, Second World War, came back, and he wanted to continue his education, and Maholi Nagy, N-A-G-Y, was in Chicago at the time at what was called the Institute of Design. And boy, did I learn a lot. And nobody talked a lot about art. It was the phenomenon of what you're seeing and how it talks to you, and how all these different factors are articulated into a larger whole, and you're a part of it. And that's not just gibberish that may sound like it, but this took. I mean, this really stuck in me. And so when I, going back to when I got discharged from the Navy, I hadn't forgotten it, but I thought, well, just get in and, try to get your feet on the ground. And the next thing I knew, I was majoring in art. And the next thing I knew, I was working on direct carving, and had some cherry wood that I found, and I didn't think of it as sculpture. I was just carving. And I don't know, I just never looked back. I loved the unfoldingness of sculpture. The fact that you can't just look at one part of it. It takes you. You unfold with it. And that's not just gibberish. If it's a successful piece of sculpture, this is what will happen. And I don't know, got my bachelor's degree, and then signed up for master's work and continued working. Then discovered welding. And oh my God, that was a conch over the head. What a beautiful thing to be able to add and subtract, and all the different surfaces that are available to you, and the strength of this. And the next thing I knew, I discovered stainless steel. Well, goes beyond words. Doesn't oxidize. Some say, I talked to a metallurgist, they said, well, it does, but it's don't worry about it. It just has its own way, then so don't worry about it. And I don't. I've gone to stainless pieces that I produced, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Nothing, nada. Now, it may have dirt on it, but oxidation, no. Any of the strength inherent in the sculpture itself, nothing. And I like that. Then, I don't know, I taught, had 4 wonderful years of teaching art. Just beautiful kids, Bloomington Junior High, 4 years. I still bump into some of those people. They're all, grown up adults. Some of them are grandparents by now. And it was told to me by one of the faculty members there. I said, what is it about this connection I have with these kids? And he said, Ed, you and they have the same emotional age. He was right. And then from there, I don't know, there was a vacancy at Illinois Wesleyan in Bloomington, Illinois. So I started teaching there, and eventually started teaching sculpture there. And met this beautiful lady that I've been married to now for 30-some years. And one thing led to another, and I had applied for a National Endowment for the Arts grant. It was really a nice grant, a good chunk of money, and got it. And I just thought, well, it's time to move on. Gail said it's time to move on, and I did. I jumped. You could say I jumped off the cliff. But for the sake of these things, and why the size, I don't know. I think there are just, my ideas seem to require the expansiveness of these things, and the ways in which stainless steel talks to you. And I've had this reinforced by people who bought my work or have seen my work, and this is really a kind of a summation of things that they've had to say too. But I'm not trying to be cute or anything when I say this, but I'd rather do this than work. I love seeing an idea unfold from the maquette stage. Maquette is a French word, means scale model, little guy. And I like seeing that process. I don't want to do any more of these though. These are really hard.
All right, who you are?
So, where was I?
The steel, stainless steel, and
Yeah.
you talked a little bit about scale, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about, I mean, they're not monumental, but they have a human scale in that you really experience them with your feet, you know, and so you have to really come to the work, which I think is a valuable aspect of it.
I think so too, and it's interesting. This is the third or fourth time I've used the word dialogue, and I don't want to overwork it, but there is an invitation to come into these pieces that I put into it, and it shows up, and people like doing that. And the stainless steel is a part of the greeting committee that is there waiting for you. And for one thing, the surfaces, they'll get dirty, but they don't rust. There's no oxidation. You can sit on these things. You can walk on them. They really endure. I mean, these pieces are pretty substantial, and you don't have to worry about them rusting out or anything, because stainless doesn't rust. It just doesn't do it. And so I just really build the heck out of them so that anybody can get in here, and I love seeing this large pieces that I have around. Sometimes you catch people unawares. They don't know who I am, you know, and I'll see them. They're stretched out on them. There's 3 or 4 of them talking, and they hanging from them, and not just doing nonsensical acrobatics. I mean, just good people having a good time on one of my sculptures, and the sculptor likes it. It embraces them, and I think, well, conceptually that's what I'm after. That this is good.
We have people that get their graduation photos taken in front of your sculpture, or in your sculpture at the Art Center.
I love it.
I mean, every year there'll be 10, 20 people that come to get their photos taken there.
That's really nice. That's good news.
Yeah.
But there's Brancusi is certainly one of the beacons, conceptual beacons in my career, the people who have been significant. Ruel Haig, wood carver out of New York, came here from somewhere down in the Balkan area, I think, in Europe. He certainly, his work influenced me a great deal. David Smith, I'm just going through kind of an abbreviated thing here, but not as much as you might think. I think his work ethic more than anything else. You know, if you're going to make these things, don't farm them out. I don't like that. I just, if you bring in a maquette and you say, okay, build this, and Because I can tell you, there are little nuances here and there. When you're building these, I'll think, no, wait a minute, that looks good in the maquette, and it will look kind of neat, okay, but kind of, wait a minute. And I'll make some changes, and in retrospect, they were really significant changes, and if I hadn't made them, it would have been a good piece, but it wouldn't have gone to the level that it did. And so I think you gotta be, or I have to be with these pieces from the very beginning to the very end. And you might say, well, what's it like letting them go? Well, it's not easy. It's harder than you think. I mean, you know, and yet, when you let go of them and they're out and you come up on them, it's like, you know, like your wife waving, she's been shopping all day and you've been around over at the museum, you see her, hey kid, and that's nice, that's nice.
What are some of your takeaways as a life, as an artist? When I started making art, I don't know to stop. When I started, you know, now I view success as continuing to make work and continuing to learn and expand. But there's a lot of professional lessons too that go with all that. But you've had a rich life with a very productive work ethic. What are some of the things that surprised you maybe, or the lessons that you've come back to again and again?
Turn it back on, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you turn it on?
It's on.
Oh.
Well, that's an excellent question, and I don't know that I can give a satisfactory response to it, and by satisfactory I mean a response that will have some real meat to it and not just skin and bones. I've tried being away from the studio for a while to give myself a break, let's say. Yeah, everybody should take a vacation. Right. And I'm in that position right now. I really can't come in here and work right now. I've got some medical situations and yet, boy, it's nice. It's nice. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's impossible for me to nail it down. I love doing this stuff. I remember reading about Giacometti and Brancusi and some of these people who were really mentors for me. And at the time, I didn't. They'd say kind of the same thing, you know. And it's not just because this is what I do. These things, when they're finished, there's a reality here that I don't know how else you could attain it. And I've talked to so many people. They love to come into these things. And notice I didn't say they love to come up and look at them. They come into them. You can look at them from afar, and that's fine. But people they'll say, geez, I just like it. And it's not because they're getting warm and fuzzy and therapeutic or anything like that. There's another aspect of being on this earth that it has to do with deep human satisfaction, gratification, a deep, meaningful connection. And sculpture, particularly sculpture you can walk into it, that's what I'm after. And that's what you're going to get in these pieces. there's a piece from this series, the Meridian series, that is up at, what's the name of the college, the Catholic Dominican University. They commissioned the piece. And I just happened to be in the neighborhood. This is up in the southwest side of Chicago. Beautiful little Catholic school. And I just dropped in, and this guy came up. I didn't know who he was. He could have been, you know, the local senator. He could have been a janitor. I had no idea. And he came up and he said, what do you think of this? You know, and I said, yeah, I like it. And then we talked about it. And he was nuts about them. He went into this discursive thing about how people come up and I don't have the words. He's a really educated man, and he put it into words. And I didn't know what the heck he did. Well, he was the dean. And it was like 20 years before, you know, he was probably in high school at the time that this was installed. And he said, the school centers around this. He said, people come up and they just want to be in this space. Well, that's what I do. Are we on? Yeah. There's another, there's something else I could tell you about one of the pieces. It's at Hines VA Hospital in Chicago. And it was a commission piece. And by commission, I mean there were, I think, 3 people. We all brought in maquettes and then brought it before the committee, and this is the way these things shake out. And I got the nod on it, and so after the piece had been built, and it's a large, it's the largest piece that it has my name on it, and by that I mean, you know, it's about the size of this room. It's a big one, and it's in a prominent place, yet intimate. There's a kind of a area that you come down from the back of the hospital, and it opens up into this big kind of Pelops area circle, and the piece is right in the center. And so, and it's, what could be a better site? I mean, it's just, of all the pieces I built, this really goes to the heart. I stopped in there one time, and it was late afternoon, and a bunch of these guys, patients, and some of these guys are really shot up in the head. I mean, they can walk and so forth, but I mean, they're just doomed. And I'm not trying to paint an ugly picture of it, but I mean, this is the way some of our guys have come back, and they're in their 50s and 60s, and thank God there's a place like Hines VA Hospital to accommodate them. And there are a couple of these guys. They said, I just was one of the people looking at the piece. They didn't know who I was from Job. And so I asked him, tell me about this. He says, oh, man, boy, sometimes in the afternoons and in the mornings, I just got to come down here, and it takes me in. He says, it's a place I can be, and I can lean on it. He said, it's nice. He says, I belong here. And I'm only scratching the surface. I mean, I wept. He left, and I was weeping. I thought, what the hell have you done, Ed? Well, I don't know. But the testimony that guy gave me, he said, I can come in and it welcomes me. He said, I can come in. He showed me one little area. He said, I lean in here sometimes, and he said, you have no idea. I'm trying to stay away from the 4-letter words here, but I mean, it was pretty raunchy. And he said, I can, and he says, come on in. Come on, you can lean on me. Come on in. Wow. Now, aesthetics aside, it had to have a good aesthetic grounding. You just can't throw junk out there that's gonna, you know, it's got to have some aesthetic grounding. But, and I didn't have that in mind when I built the piece. However, it was dedicated to my brother, and my brother was in the First Army or the Second Army, whatever he said.
First Army.
First Army. He was on Normandy beachhead, survived. Most of the people in his outfit didn't. And as if that wasn't bad enough, then he wound up towards the end of the war, and he was one of the few who liberated Buchenwald concentration camp. Well, let me tell you, he never recovered. Now, he was a good photographer. He was a, you know, Bob, and he was a gentleman. You know, he was a educated person, and, you know, just ran with a good pack of people. But there was, up here, he was really deformed by that. And I dedicated that piece to him, in memory of him. And when those guys came up and were doing, I thought, Bob, this is good.
Art can do that. Whether we design it or not, it can do that. It can exceed our understandings.
Mm-hmm. Boy, is that
Well,
clear.
boy, well spoken.
So you can't start off a piece saying I want to achieve this, but it happens in the doing.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, in spite of the indifference that we may bring to the studio on any given day, I've come in here sometimes and I'm tired. 15 minutes later, I'm a sucker.
That's good.
Talk a little bit about that discipline, the discipline of coming into the studio. You know, there are artists that tell me, well, you know, I really have to be inspired, and
No.
I think
No, that's
bullshit.
That is bullshit.
I mean, inspiration comes in the doing. So,
That's right.
Yeah.
I couldn't say it better. I couldn't say it better. What I can do is reinforce what you and Gail just said. Look, I had to stay out of here for the last year because I really got banged up. Not from anything in here necessarily, but just part of hitting my mid-80s and realizing there's some stuff that's got to be attended to by your good people at the VA hospital. And so, but I can tell you that this is not easy work. This is, brace yourself on, this is butt-kicking work. And sometimes you fall on your ass. But I don't know any other way to make it. And the argument stands. Well, you could have somebody make this for you. Yes, you could. For one thing, I wouldn't make any money or when the piece would sell or anything. I mean, they got to be paid. They have guys that come in there and they got families to feed, and all that. But I like doing this. I love doing it. And sometimes I leave here and I shut the door a little hard because I want to hear it slam. I don't want to see this thing anymore. But the next day when it's time to, if the weather's conducive and everything, not real hot, I want to be back in here. And I don't know, you could say, well, maybe you got this from your Irish father. He was a tool and die maker the latter part of his adult years, and before that he walked the iron. He was an iron worker, up a couple hundred feet in the air walking on, and he liked it, and he was good. So I think there's some of that in me too. I like coming in here, and when like this whole element over here, when those come together, and this is all ready to receive it. And it'll slide right in here, and then you get them all. Boy, there's nothing fun. I mean, wow. You know, it's the sort of thing that you just stand back and you realize, geez, I need my hanky. I got a tear coming up.
Of the Meridian series, and how many pieces you've done in that.
Where did the idea come from?
Yeah,
Remember Paul Celan and his Meridian speech? And then
Yeah.
the idea of the Meridian in the Navy, on the map. I mean, you know more about that than I do.
yeah.
Well, perhaps I do. And the European poet Paul Celan is the one who the germ for the whole thing came out of his work, and it was a tragic life that he had, and I don't know if he's the best poet in the world or top 10 or whatever, but boy, he knocked me on my ass. And he was talking about the meridian, and I remember in the book of poetry I have on Celan, I almost said on Paul, you know, it's first name basis. It jarred me, and I wanted to know what is this meridian thing, and I think it was just luck. At the time, then I was conceptually in my work, I was moving in a direction, and I thought, and Paul Celan was on my mind, and I thought, and meridian means, you know, the primary circle, that which is fundamental. You know, you don't get much more fundamental than the meridian. And the next thing I knew, I was doing a sculpture called, and I think I called it Meridian.
Yeah, it wasn't even Meridian.
It was just Meridian.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh gee, we got a problem now. How many? You know, it wants to morph. It wants to stay overnight. You know, what are we gonna do? And then, you know, there's no turning back. I mean, it's like the art goes fishing for people, and you know, when they were fishing for me, I grabbed that hook, and then what makes matter worse was I finally got out of my mouth, and I said, I don't want to go back there. I'm going to stay here. This is cool. I like this. And so I never looked back. So, and this is, you know, why coda? Well, I like the word coda anyway. Coda, that's fun to say. Coda. But I did 10 meridians. And I knew, if I'm repeating myself, I thought, well, I don't know. I want one more, you know, one more time. And this one's for me. I don't think, I don't worry about it. this is for me. And the little lady over here, it's up to her, it's her piece. Whatever she wants to do with it.
So there's something fundamental, or elemental about working with metal, you know, and we think of our magnetic coordinates, and metal has a different character, and I think when we say something's magnetic or we're drawn to something, it has all those characteristics. But it's also magical. I mean, to take something from rock, you know, transmortify it into something else. I mean, it's an alchemy, you know. You've done paintings too. We have a nice one that was donated to the Art Center, but you've staked your flag on magic material, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about stainless has been the engine for you?
What was it after a couple of months and I realized this was to be the lady that I was going to live the rest of my life with? Love. I love stainless. It's tough. I mean, if you're going to work with this stuff, brace yourself. It does not yield easily. But by the same token, when this thing is out there, just like that piece that's at the Art Center in Bloomington, you walk in there, stainless has provided a great place to sit down and be. You don't have to,
And the luminosity of it.
the luminosity is, and yet it's not blinding. It's like anything else. You look at the sun, you're going to get blinded, you know. But no, and it's permanent. It's so rewarding to work with. It requires a little extra finesse when you're welding and when you're learning to weld it. And there's just going to be a period of anywhere from several days to maybe several weeks. I don't know. Everyone I've talked with, and it's not a lot, people who have worked with stainless in their career pretty much say the same thing. There's a certain point you just cross over, and you know, sure, it's hard. You know, it's fast heat coefficient, you know, and just all sorts of things. Well, you learn to deal with that. And it winds up like this. I mean, and you brace that sucker, and boy, I'm telling you, it's really pretty darn solid, you know. I mean, you just, and I've seen so many, some of my pieces already included, been outdoors, and they're doing okay, but Corten steel is nice. I built some pieces in Corten. It produces an oxidation, and theoretically it holds that oxidation. Well, so much for theory. It rusts. It rusts. I don't want my pieces rusting out. Stainless says, hey, come on over.
But it has wonderful, I mean, the way that it interacts with the air and the light,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I mean, it ends up, the surface has a life of its own.
Yeah.
You know, and it, I mean, you have your formal elements, but then that introduces, you know, a type of movement that you don't necessarily get from other sculptural.
No, you don't. No, I don't think you do. Yeah, this is what I like about it. And I just, I mean, this is going to be a task. My health is getting back in shape, and I was in this morning, and I was poking around with this thing a little bit, and I know what's ahead of me, but I like working on this. I mean, I like doing this, and stainless is just, man, you pour your heart and soul into this thing, and it just says, man, I'm right there with you.
The life of an artist offers a lot of rewards, a lot of challenges. It's not something that people really retire from. And you've lived your life as a very active artist with a national reputation. And what have been, well, how has your understanding of that life changed? When you were young, you went to art museums and you experienced that, and now to be on the other end of that, and you're looking at all these works that have impacted so many people and are loved in communities. Every time I go to the airport, I see people hurrying to catch their plane, but then stopping.
Oh, good.
And that's pretty magical to stop someone who's on a mission to have that moment of reflection. I don't know where I'm going with this, but
I understand what you're saying. How do you relate your life as a human being and your life's work as a sculptor?
Yes.
How do you integrate those two?
yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's a good question. There you go, Ed.
Well, it's again, just because it's a difficult question, with words to bring into to give some meat and bone and structure with words. It doesn't mean that the question itself, just because it's difficult, isn't worthwhile. I think it's the question of all questions. And I'm gonna tell you a little story. I had a sabbatical leave from Illinois Wesleyan University, and
Sorry about that.
I had access to a sabbatical leave, and so Gail was at home, and I said, I just got to get in the truck, and I'm going to go out, head east. I'd like to kind of see where David Smith worked a little bit, and I don't know, I just maybe see one of my former students, Dawn Nelson, which I did, and so forth, and then just got to make a stop down by New London, Connecticut, which was our base, where the big submarine base, and stopped off and saw some folks there. I didn't spend as much time as I thought I might, but anyway, coming back, I stopped. Now this is when they still had little phone booths, and there was a little phone booth, and it was a place where this guy Ruel Haig, I remember it said it was where, I forget the name of the place, but anyway.
Woodstock.
And I looked up, and Haig, Ruel, so I called him. Now this is the sculptor Ruel Haig. And I introduced myself, and I said, I studied your work, and I'm a sculptor, and blah, 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 blah. He said, well, come on over. And I said, okay, love it. I went over and spent the afternoon. And this guy put the finishing touches on my education almost in a reverential, spiritual way. I mean, he sat there at a little table. I mean, talk about modest living. I mean, he was just a spiritual person. I'm grasping for words here. And so we sat at this little table, and there was a window here, and the window was open, and he made some coffee, and we're sitting there drinking coffee. And these little tiny birds came up to the window, and then they flew inside, and they flew in front of us. And I said, whoa, what's with, and he said, oh, those are my friends. So matter of factly, I'm not making this up, friends. I don't lie. Even when I'm bullshitting you, I don't lie. No. And then they kind of flew over by me, and I mean, right there, little tiny guys. And he said, they're my friends. Well, it was a life-changing experience. And he said, now, what are you going to do? He said, I had slides of my pictures of my work, and he said, well, you're good. Well, thank you. He said, now, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I got to fulfill the requirements for this, sabbatical leave. He was familiar with what sabbatical meant and all that stuff, but he was disinterested in it, really. And he said, so you're really good. And you're going to go back and you're going to put this all in a secondary. He didn't use that, but. And he said, well, he didn't say too bad. He didn't have to. And I filled it in. And that the trip back to Illinois from Woodstock, where he lived, it was a wonderful experience. It was a life-changing experience with him. And he had nothing to lose. He had everything to lose if he gave me dumb advice. This was from the heart. This was Roald Haig. And he knew that I knew his work, and he knew that I really liked it. And he didn't say we have a lot in common. He didn't get into all that, but we did have a lot in common. We still do. I mean, he's long since died, but I tell you, his presence is palpable in here sometimes. It's one of the reasons I keep these chairs in here. Roald's over there sitting, He was really, really significant. I came back and I described it to Gail, and one thing led to another, and by the next year I put in my leave of retirement, not retirement.
Letter of resignation.
Letter of resignation, yeah. And everything just fell in place. I got on the heels of that, I got the big, what was that grant thing?
The National Endowment.
National Endowment for the Arts, I got that. And just one thing led to another, and here we are. And it's just, but Haig was really key to that. I think I would have gone in this direction anyway, but with having his blessing, there's something about a really important person whose credentials are just unimpeachable. Who can argue with Roald Haig? Nobody. You're nuts. I mean, the man was just fabulous. Work just, oh my God, look at this. And when I got that endorsement from him, that was like when back in my old Navy days, pull into a port and we needed to get our fuel tanks filled up. That was like pulling in, get those fuel tanks filled up, station your maneuvering watch and head out to sea, man. I never looked back. I'm going to look in the direction of my lovely wife. Is there anything that you can think of? Because
Well, I just think you've been the most disciplined person I've ever known.
I think every successful artist is disciplined.
Yeah,
The practice is discipline.
yeah, it's just, I mean, you're always focused when you're working, and to such an extent that other things that would ruffle people, you just slough it off. And I think that's been your work ethic, your dedication, your inspiration from poetry, music, great literature. You know, your favorite poets, W.S. Merwin, John Berryman, Paul Celan, your musicians that you love, your Mahler.
oh, Mahler.
Nature has been a huge factor in your life.
Yeah, yeah. Give it everything. Give it your all. Why not?
How about the cherry tree when you lived in Hoopston? When you were a little boy. That
Yeah.
was the beginning of all of it.
Yeah, we had a cherry tree in the backyard, and there were things I wanted to get away from. And so I'd go up and go way up in this cherry tree. I'd sit there and just spend the afternoon. And birds would come along, come real close to you, just, hello. And all this other stuff that was going on down below, that's down there.
That's a lot like making artwork. You get to engage and be enveloped by something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
nice. You had a significant role in the development of the Woodland County Arts Center. You and Nanki and others. Can you give me just a couple of minutes about that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I sure could.
Yeah, you should talk about a little bit about Nanki too.
Well, Nanki was, she was blood kin to me. What a gracious, kind, generous, tough-minded. Boy, don't cross her. Whew. She'll take you down. Even if she goes down with you. I'm sure there are folks who could attest to this. I never saw it, but I knew it. I've seen people like her. But I had a deep, deep love for that woman. And she saw, and she loved Gail. This is my third marriage. And how can a man go through two marriages? And Nanki stood by me. And when we got married, Nanki was she told me, she said, Ed, this is a great gal. You hit pay dirt, Ed. You hit pay dirt. And she stood by me in a lot. I won't say a lot, but there were some people who it was hard. I was not easy to stand by. I mean, I have rough edges, and I know it. But and you could say, well, why don't you do something about it? Well, I don't have time. I mean, I've got one lifetime, and if you can't stand a rough edge now and then, why don't you go? There's a saloon over there. Go order here. I'll order a round of drinks for you and stay there. Get out of my way. I mean, that's who Ed McCullough is, and that's who Nancy Merwin was. We were tight. We were very, very tight. And there were a couple times, by God, we needed some help. We really did. One time I don't know, I had to put a lot of money into a big load of stainless steel that came in, and electrodes, and this, all this stuff is expensive. And I called her, and she said, Ed, don't worry about it. I paid her back. She said, I'll have some stuff for you. What she did was a check. And a couple of months later, I paid her back. But that's who she was. Now, if somebody wasn't worthy of her trust, or was, whatever, I think she could blow you off, and so could I. But we had a connection. Of all the people I want to see when I go into the great place in the sky, I want to see Nancy Merwin. I want to sit down with her and have a couple of drinks and just get a little shit-faced.
She so successfully piloted so many things that define what's normal.
Yeah.
So many organizations, and the nature preserve, and social services, and the arts. I mean, she was a completely wholly formed person with her interests and her giving.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's very generous
yeah,
and smart.
yeah.
Yeah. I have no doubts that she must have been a troubling person for folks who weren't ready for her or able to handle it. What do you say? God help you. Because I think the issue was always bigger than she was. Address the issue. Please, address the issue.